You can either choose your life to try and please your environment, and ultimately they won't be pleased and you won't be pleased, or you can do what you want as long as it's within morals, values, integrity, and not breaking the law. You can do what you want and you will live an extraordinary life.
Hi, welcome to the Tarun Stevenson Leadership Channel. I'm your host, Tarun Stevenson, and we are all about helping you lead, communicate, and grow to your full potential. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite podcasting app, don't forget to subscribe and follow so that you can stay up to date with all our latest episodes. All right, here's the latest episode. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, Tarun Stevenson here, and I'm with Kenyon Salo, all the way from the United States. He is an inspirational, motivational speaker, and he works in the area of helping people live their best life ever. And you've got a really interesting thing on your website where you're also a skydiver for the Denver Broncos. Welcome, Kenyon. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Tarun, thanks so much for having me. I'm super fired up to be here and be a part of this podcast and share anything that could be helpful to anybody else, anybody that's listening right now. And for me, I've been a consummate learner. I want to learn as much as I can about life, learn as much as I can about other people, and also learning it about adventures. And so my whole life has been doing some adventures. And an adventure could be just going for a hike or a challenge or something that not many people would do, travel, and then wanting to help and teach others along that path. And so as I continue to learn in life in all areas, I like to return and be able to help others do the same. So yeah, that's the little, in a nutshell, my life.
I love it. And you've got quite a background in adventure sports. You did some snowboarding professionally, is that right?
Yeah, skateboarding is where it all started, and I was trying to figure out what to do in the winter because I lived on the East Coast in New England area, and it would snow these horrendous winters. And in my skateboard magazine, these things called snowboards started showing up. This was back in the late 80s. So it was super early. I got my first snowboard. You still had to call the mountain to see if they allowed snowboarding. And that's what I would do. And then eventually from snowboarding, I moved to Colorado, became a professional snowboarder, traveled around the world doing that, competed, went to the X Games, all kinds of stuff like that. And then naturally progressed from there into skydiving and base jumping. And now I do some professional skydiving into the Denver Broncos, which is the NFL, the football team. I get to jump into their home games, every single home game that they have.
Wow, that's fantastic. Tell us, how did you get into the Denver Broncos team? What was the process there, or how did that even come to you?
Well, originally, they had skydivers from the military jumping in, but that was always big parachutes, slow and docile, coming in and landing slow. And the stadium was looking for something more high energy, some faster pace, things along those lines. And they did some research, and they found out there was this thing called swooping, which is basically high-performance landings. And they reached out to the drop zone that I was working at. Now, originally, I wasn't on the team. It had been going for 2 years, and then there was a position that was open, and I got to try out for the team. And it's one of those things, when you try out for the team, you get one shot.
Right.
You get to, they drop you over to the stadium. It's an empty stadium. You have to land on the field perfectly. You get one try.
Wow.
And fortunately, I did it right, landed on the field perfectly, and then I've been doing it ever since, which is now, this is the 11th season coming up. And hundreds of games that I've attended and jumped into, and I've never come through the gates to attend a game. I've always come from the air.
Fantastic. So for those who are ignorant about skydiving like myself, tell me what swooping is and how does that differ from just jumping out of a plane as a regular skydiver?
Well, back in the day, when someone jumped out of an airplane, the parachute was there to keep you alive and get you safely to the ground so that you could do another skydive. And then as people started to understand that these are wings, and these wings can be manipulated and flown in such a way that they can create high speeds. And so what happened is, as these high performance wings started to be created, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s, and still advances to this day, what happens is that anywhere between 1,800 feet, 1,600 feet, we basically dive the parachute in a 270 degree, 540, 720, just a certain number of rotations, which dives the parachute towards the ground at speeds upwards of 50, 60, 70 miles an hour.
Wow.
And then at the right altitude, you plane out the canopy. So now you're underneath it instead of next to it, diving towards the ground. And it goes across the ground at about 50 or 60 miles an hour. And you're basically dragging your toe. Maybe you do it across water, or you do it down a field or whatever. And you're just dragging until it slows and basically stalls out. And then you run it out. So it's a high performance turn and landing somewhere between 50 and 70 miles an hour.
Wow. That's awesome. So I think it'd be safe to say that you're a bit of an adrenaline junkie. Is that right?
Well, that's part of it. I mean, sure, when I first got into skydiving, it was like, how much adrenaline can I get? This is so cool. But now it's a sport, and it's always been a sport. But for me, once I progressed to that sport phase, learning how to really fly my body better, fly my parachute better, perform in the sport as a whole, anything I could do along those lines to make it better.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Kenyon, I'm really interested to learn the story about how you got into motivational speaking. You had a really exciting early career as a snowboarder and got into adventure sports. But what led you to the path of now being a motivational speaker and trainer? You're in schools, you work with businesses all over the country. What was that story and what got you there?
Well, I really believe that we are an amalgamation of all the stories in our life, and really that's how it all came together. I'm horrendous at singing, horrendous at dancing and drawing and any artistic scenario. But if I look back on my life, the skill set that I naturally was given was communication.
Right.
So I naturally understood communication. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, learning adventures and then wanting to help other people be able to do the same. An example is when I was in middle school and high school, we used to go to the train bridge in the summertime and jump from the train bridge about 10 meters, 30 feet into the water below. And some of the kids didn't know how to do it. So I would coach them through that process to be able to do it. Sometimes it would take 10 minutes. Sometimes it would take 30 minutes. But I would coach them like, okay, this is what you're going to do. This is what you need to think about. This is the important stuff. And then they would do it. And then I would celebrate them. I would be so fired up. I'd be like, yeah, you did it. That's amazing. High fives. And so it was a natural thing that I did early on, and that always transferred to everything I did. Yeah. And in all the jobs I had, I always enjoyed the training aspects. I never enjoyed the actual aspect of doing the job itself because that repetitive stuff always wore on me. But when they said, okay, now that you've learned this, can you go train others? I was like, yes, I can. And then have a room of people listening. Eventually, I knew that I always wanted to be on stage. And even in the early 2000s, when I was really devouring Tony Robbins and just seeing what he was doing, I was like, oh, something like that one day. Yeah. But I didn't have a platform. And it wasn't until, even with mentors and things like that helped me with training and speaking, it wasn't until 2015 when I really knew what the platform that I was going to speak about was, which is the bucket list life. Yeah. And once I had that, then it all kind of started to happen and fall into place. And I started to get bookings and started getting paid. And then I said, okay, how do I treat this like a business? And then really rallied over the last 5 years to go from local events to now international keynote speaking.
Brilliant. And do you remember that moment where you had that really realization that the stage was where you were meant to be? Who were you watching? Who were you engaging with at the time? What was that moment like?
Well, I found Tony Robbins in 1993, 94, and I was learning the personal development side of things. Yeah. In early 2000, I remember watching a video of his, and I said, someday. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to figure out how to get there. And then some key turning points is where I started to show up on stage. I wasn't really getting paid a lot, but I was doing trainings, and I was working with my mentor, and he was teaching me a lot about authenticity. And I was doing some, basically following or shadowing per se. But again, there's so many people that want to be on stage. There's so many people that have amazing messages, but they don't know exactly what the message is. So here's an example. I'm going to be on stage. They'll say, I'm going to be on stage and teach about leadership. Yeah. Well, what about leadership? Well, leadership stuff. Well, what's your message? What's your platform? Yeah. And they have a bunch of stories, but they don't know how to bring them together to share one delivery message around leadership that is impactful. So the question is when was that moment? I would say the moment was when I found the platform, and that's the Bucket List Life. And that was Christmas Eve, 2013. And I just started writing notes down into the early morning, into Christmas Day. It was like 2 a.m. I'm still writing notes down. And that's when the Bucket List Life came to fruition.
I love it. And so you've already brought up the bucket list, but I really want you to unpack this for us, because I've been watching some of your videos and reading through your website, and I love the concept of the bucket list. So I'm not going to give it away, but why don't you just tell our listeners and watchers, what is the bucket list? Give us an overview, and let's just have a chat about that.
So when I was really, really young, my mom gave me a book that's, 101 things you should do, that kind of thing. And I remember seeing all this stuff, and I remember the book itself. I wish I still had it. And then the term bucket list came out right around the Bucket List movie at that time with Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman. And that's where really now people had a name to it. What do you do before you kick the bucket? But then I started saying, well, what am I doing? And I realized I was living a bucket list life. I was living the bucket list life. So that's where the concept, the bucket list life. And so a bunch of friends and I got together, and we said, we were doing things, and it wasn't just about like checking things off. Like, I went skydiving, I went rafting, I hiked this mountain. We started saying, well, what is the meaning of the bucket list life? Because I really believe that as a speaker, your platform must absolutely mirror who you are authentically in life. And what were the things that I was doing? First, I was always creating more experiences, consistently trying to find ways to create more experiences, whether it was skydiving, snowboarding, hiking, or someone's like, hey, do you want to go see this thing? And you're like, well, what is that? Well, it's a big popular thing. Everybody goes to it. Well, of course, let's go to it. Now it's an experience. Right. So you go do those things that you wouldn't normally do. You just say yes. You let the how figure itself out later, and it shows up. But then I realized that a lot of the things that we do as humans is we share stories. So there's create more experiences. That's the first step. The second is share more stories, because that's what we're doing on podcasts. That's what you want to do. I'm sharing my stories. You're sharing your stories with your listeners. And it's a really important thing. So that's step 2. And the third thing, which is why I believe we're on this planet and what we're here to do, and that's to live more fulfilled. And we do that by helping others. Yeah. And ultimately, it's about helping. And I realized that if any person did those three things, and not necessarily in order, they would be happy. They would not feel stuck. They would be happy. They would feel alive. And you just rinse and repeat. Just keep doing those things. So therefore, the storyline of create more, share more, live more came out of that. And then I built a keynote around it. And then it became this entire experience, storytelling, and wonderful way to help others from the stage. So that's how it all came to fruition.
I love it. Let's I want to unpack the first point that you made, create more experiences. And forgive me if I don't phrase this correctly, but you said something about make the decision and then let the details work themselves out. Is that your phrase, or?
It's close, and it still means the same thing. Yeah. So I generally from the stage, I say yes. Yeah. And let the how figure itself out later. Right. Because so many times what happens is people say, someone says, hey, do you want to do something? No. Yeah. And the reason they said no, it comes down to 4 things: time, responsibilities, financial, or fear. Yeah. Those 4 things, it doesn't matter where I go in the world, those 4 things come up for people, and they come up so fast in people's mind. I don't have time. I don't have the money. So they just, no. And that's what they say. Yeah. So instead, what I would love is for people to just simply say yes. Yeah. And then they go, ooh, that's a little scary. Like I said yes. What did I say yes to? I'm not sure. And then the how starts to unfold. Do you know the hardest part about doing a skydive is not actually doing the skydive. It's actually going on the internet or picking up the phone and booking the skydive.
Is that right?
That's the hardest part. Yeah. Once you do that, it's on the calendar. What do I wear? Who's driving? What are we going to eat? Show up that day. Okay, the people are getting ready. Oh, I'm on a plane. Now I'm out the door. That's exactly how it works.
Yeah, you're spot on there. And I've been a big believer in just get out there, have a go, and work out build the plane as it flies, if you like. And I find a lot of the time it's very counterintuitive to the way that our culture operates, especially with the school system. And we teach kids from a very young age, you've got to plan out your life. You've got to know what you want to do with your life. And more I'm finding interesting that the people who are really succeeding in life didn't start out with much of a plan. Yes, a plan's important, but they started out with a dream to just have a go at something. What would you say the process is for somebody who maybe they've been caught by the fear of knowing the end result before they have a go? What's the process that you would say take them through to get them saying yes when fear can be such a paralyzing factor in all of that?
Well, nobody knows the end result.
No.
Like, you might think you do, but that's where the fear comes up because you think you're smarter than what the possibility is. Here's the thing. I've never done something that I was super disappointed that I did. Like, when someone said, let's do this thing, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I do it. I'm like, that was so fun. Like, why didn't we do this earlier? And the thing with fear is, and a lot of people say this, we're only born with two fears, fear of falling and fear of loud noises. Right. Other than that, everything's, made up. I mean, like I had a trip planned to go to Italy, and all of a sudden there was an earthquake, and someone's like, there was an earthquake 2 weeks ago. Are you going to Italy? Like, A, it was 2 weeks ago. B, it was south of where we're going. Yeah. And C, earthquakes happen. And that's the kind of thing. It's like, you just got to keep going. And if you live by paralysis analysis, okay, that's your choice, but not mine. Yeah,
no, fair enough. And so how do you balance that? Because you're going to have some people that say, yeah, but you've got to be wise, and you've got to weigh the potential for danger or whatever it is. And I guess, our current situation with COVID-19 and how nobody could have predicted the way that 2020 has gone about. But there's an element where we've had to listen to the wisdom of the health experts, but at the same time, you can allow that fear to stop you from doing anything and just curl up in a ball and a fetal position. So how do you balance the, wisdom against not letting it hold you back?
All right, so we have a couple of scenarios here. And first, I'll just address COVID-19. Yeah. When it comes to that, I am all for wearing masks. I'm all for protecting other people and having them wear masks and protect me. Yeah. I absolutely want the fact that if we do this right, we can be done with it sooner than later, and we can get back to doing what we were doing. Right. So I'm all for making sure that's safe. Mm-hmm. There's no reason to be going out and partying shoulder to shoulder, sweating all over each other, and being like, that was the best pool party ever, and I'm glad I said yes. Okay, that's not what I'm advocating here. So obviously, when it comes down to this type of scenario in a pandemic, it's important to listen to the experts, and that's the wisdom side of things, and trust that process and go, you know what? I might not have to choose to go on that holiday vacation, but what could I do in my town that I've never done, that people come to my town all the time and do, and go do that thing and social distance and be safe and still have a great time. Yeah. So there's ways to say yes in your local environment without endangering others. Right. Now, let's take the pandemic out of the situation here, and let's just talk about like the potential, like you come out of the pandemic or what's going to happen in a couple of years from now. What you're talking about is people. You talk about your inner circle or the story in your head or your coworkers or your friends or your family members, and you're talking about them having wisdom. Yeah. Well, really what they are is your environment, and your environment is stronger than your willpower. Your willpower is your life saying, I want to do this in life. I'm going to have an amazing life. And then your environment shows up and goes, don't do that. Don't start that business. You'll lose a lot of money, right? Don't go into that relationship. You'll break your heart. Don't go skydiving. You'll probably, how many of people right now listening to this just said die in their head, right? No, not die. Nobody's dying around here. But in their head, they're like, well, I'm wise. I saw it on the news once. Someone died. So therefore, you shouldn't do it. And that's where it's like, okay, hold up here. You can either choose your life to try and please your environment, and ultimately they won't be pleased and you won't be pleased. Or you can do what you want, as long as it's within morals, values, integrity, and not breaking the law. You can do what you want and you will live an extraordinary life.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how do you distinguish who those voices are? Because like I'm guessing when you first started skydiving, you didn't just jump out of a plane without somebody teaching you or without an expert speaking into what you were doing. So there's this balance of getting the right expert wisdom, but not listening to every naysayer. that may have an opinion about what you're doing? How do you decipher those voices? You know, we're talking about leaders here and business owners, and some of them are having to make decisions where everybody's got an opinion, but not everybody's opinion is valid. How do you pass out those, the difference between the expert and the opinion in your world?
Well, it comes down to results. All right. So if you want something in life and somebody's talking, all you have to do is look at their results. They may be great at something. Maybe they're a phenomenal chef, but they know nothing about skydiving. Right. And they're the ones saying, skydiving's super dangerous. Have you done a skydive? No. Okay. Go to the professional and say, okay, obviously people are saying skydive is dangerous. How come? Well, these are the things that make it dangerous and why people have died. Okay, well, I don't plan on doing those things. But do I understand that death could be part of the scenario? Absolutely. Do I do everything to mitigate that? Absolutely. And that comes with years and years of experience of learning from others. And unfortunately, in skydiving, in base jumping, which is what I do, wingsuit flying and those types of things, we learn from trial and error, usually from other people's trial and error. Unfortunately, sometimes error means death. So that's how it shows up. And then we read and we learn from it. Why did that person pass? What mistakes did they make? Is it anything to do with gear and things like that? They pretty much solved the gear scenario. Like over the last 4 decades, they pretty much solved the gear scenario. So now it's down to human error. Right. So in that case, I'm okay with that.
So making sure you're listening to the right voices, and your social media, I think, has become such a influential part of how people inform themselves now. But realizing that even somebody who seems influential or seems to know what they're doing may not be the expert in the situation as you're making that assessment.
It's true, and we see a lot of that. We see a lot of social media leaders, and then they're not authentic. And that's really, again, same thing I talk about from the stage and when I train speakers. I'm teaching them to be authentic. Otherwise, the audience will call BS. Every single time the audience will call BS because they know that you're not living what you're talking about. And that's the great thing for me about social media is that whatever I talk about from the stage, anybody can go to my social media and be like, yep, he's doing exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, so take us to the next point of your bucket list life, and that's sharing more stories. How does creating experiences tie into sharing more stories, and what's the process there for helping somebody live their best life?
Well, you see, creating experiences is about it's about the me. It's about what I want to do, the things I want to do. It's about the self. Yeah. So, and that's totally cool because you're saying, hey, how do I want to live my life? What experiences do I want to have? And so it's that first thing where people say, I have a list. This is what I want to see. This is what I want to do. It's what I want to experience. What happens is sharing more stories is about friends and family. It's about that bond. It's like the glue. It's the thing that makes us really go, I like that person, or I don't like that person. Yeah. But it's the thing that you start to understand about another individual. You start to really get an idea of who they are. Friends are telling stories. Coworkers are telling stories. Then you have a story. You're like, oh, I can build on that story. Right. And so what happens is as you share stories, part of what you were talking about earlier, the wisdom. So stories started long ago around the campfire, drawing on the walls or talking and passing wisdom down. This is how you stay safe. This is how you stay alive. This is how you experience a great life. This is how you navigate love. This is how you navigate just making sure that you get from point A to point B without dying in life. Yeah. So we share these stories and pass down the wisdom, but it's also how we connect. Yeah. Because it's quite possible that you could start a story and someone goes, no way. Do you actually know? And you're like, yeah, no way. And then you're that thing. Here's an example. If I'm in the United States and I bump into someone and they're like, hey, how you doing? Great. Where are you from? I'm from the United States. People are like, well, yeah, no kidding. That's where we live. But if I travel abroad and then I'm on a train and I bump into someone and I hear English and I'm like, where are you from? And they're like, I'm from the U.S. And I'm like, no way, I'm from the U.S. Like, where in the U.S.? I'm from Colorado. I'm from Colorado. Next thing you know, you're best buds just because you happen to live in the same place. But the difference is that you're in another country. So you're having an experience, but you start to share stories, and then pretty soon it builds from there. So stories are super important, and unfortunately, there are areas where we're more connected than ever, but more lonely than ever. Now, some of the great things that you can see, like Instagram stories, Facebook stories, Snapchat stories, those are still powerful because they're actually part of our storyline. But face-to-face, having dinner, breaking bread, connecting with someone, and really sharing stories, that's where it's powerful.
Absolutely. And I think we've seen the rise of this with the long form podcasts and YouTube channels, guys like Joe Rogan and how they're all built around just hearing somebody's personal story. There's something about hearing a person's life experience that is so compelling and so engaging to our own experience and how we look at life.
Well, for sure. And we're looking for some inspiration or some connection, some motivation, some just intrigue. I mean, sometimes, crime stories are all the rage. People love the crime stories because it's intriguing. You're like, I would never, but that is intriguing. Or the stories of saying like, whoa, if they did it, maybe I can. And I have those stories too, of those challenges in my life. And when that's the case, I know that those are the things I had to work through in order to get where I'm at now, because it didn't just happen. It was an overnight success in 10 years, overnight success in 40 years. And really.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. So you mentioned crime stories there. It just sort of triggered a thought for me. I was watching The Walking Dead with my mum recently, and she said, what is the fascination with these kind of morbid stories? And, you look at a lot of the shows and a lot of the movies that are produced now, we tend to have a fascination as humankind with either the morbid or the graphically, violent or whatever it might be. But I mean, there's still compelling stories. There's something about many of these stories that draw us in. What do you think it is about the human experience that makes us want to even hear stories that maybe not speaking about the best experience, but the worst of life?
Well, even in those stories that you see on Netflix, or even you can take zombie movies, there's always a hero. There's always the drive to be better, to succeed, the underlying, the Joseph Campbell hero's journey. It's still there. So again, if you just had a movie with a bunch of zombies walking around all the time, you'd be like, this is boring. But there's always this like, okay, come on, you can do it. You can do it. You can live. You're like, you're cheering someone on. And in these movies, people are helping people all the time, which again is what I talk about, living more fulfilled by helping others. The world could be going in complete chaos. And at the same time, it's like, you know what? I understand that it's me and 30 of us, and I think we're the only people left on the planet, but it doesn't matter. We're going to help each other until we survive this thing.
It's great.
So I think that's part of it, that we're always rooting and cheering somebody on. And so sometimes we forget to cheer ourselves on in life. So it's easier to sit down, push play, watch Netflix, and cheer them on and be like, oh, that was good, and then go to bed and go back to the same routine in life that we've been doing. So that's one of them. Now, what was the other part of that question that you had asked to build on that?
Well, so just we seem to have a fascination with we like the hero stories, but we like the hero stories in the context of something that's quite morbid or quite graphically violent, or perhaps not portraying life at its best, but portraying life at its worst. But I think you've answered that. Is really what we want to be able to see is how we can triumph over evil, how we can overcome adversity in our life. And so we're drawn to these powerful stories that give us that idea.
Well, and it's true. And it's just like messages from the stage. There's nothing new under the sun. It's just a different way to deliver it. And so all these stories are being delivered, whether it's a rom-com or whether it's Star Wars action adventure or whether it's a little bit, drama or horror, whatever it is, it's that same story of somebody having to persevere. And that's what we need. And so we look for some variety. And we do that through movies. And sometimes we're like, okay, I need to hear that story again, but this time I'm going to choose comedy. I need to hear that story again, but how about something with some suspense in it? And so that's how we drive it.
That's great. And you mentioned the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, and that theme is so prevalent throughout storytelling. Do you utilize that in when you're a public speaker? So let's just say anyone that's a public speaker or maybe a leader and wants to do public speaking. Do you utilize that hero's journey as a vehicle to convey your message? How important do you see the hero context for your presentation publicly?
For my presentation, for me personally, it's less about my hero's journey. So like there are amazing speakers. They summited Everest. They, had to survive X number of days being stranded. That's their hero's journey story. And that's a great story from stage, or whether it's an actor or an actress or somebody that has a story where a movie was made after them because of whatever they did was so amazing and it needs to be told. For me, what I decided to do, because the bucket list life, ultimately I decided was not about me. Now, I am the facilitator from the stage. I am the person that has the message, and I interweave some personal stories, but ultimately I always drive it back to the audience. Right. And that's one of the things that I think is making this keynote so successful, is because it's not about me on the stage. And this is what I learned from my mentor. Yeah. It was about the audience. And so I really wanted the audience to have an amazing experience. I want them to have stories to share, and I want to hear their stories. So I interact with the audience a lot. And then ultimately I want them to walk away feeling more fulfilled, like they're going to go help some people, or they're going to help themselves and have that too. So ultimately I'm always turning it back to the audience. But I use my stories and I use the overall arching story to be able to deliver the message.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Donald Miller talks about that, where he talks about as a presenter, you need to be the guide, not the hero. Your audience wants to feel like the hero. So you've got to help them locate themselves in the story as the hero, and you be the guide, or the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the story, if you like.
That's true. And that's a phenomenal way to do it. You will always succeed when you focus on the audience. Yeah, that's guaranteed. If you focus on the audience, you'll definitely succeed.
Fantastic. So you're saying yes to more experiences. You're telling more stories in order to create engagement and connection and build relationships. And the third aspect of your bucket list is to live more. That seems like a really broad statement. I mean, can you break that down a little bit and talk to us about what does it mean to live more?
So create more, share more, live more. But ultimately, to live more fulfilled, we do that by helping others. Yeah. And so really, it is about helping others. It is the reason we're on the planet. It's the thing that we want to do. We always feel best when we've done good, or we've seen people do good and we hear about it, anything along those lines, or we experience good. Here's an example. Yeah. I saw a guy, he dropped his wallet in Starbucks. Another guy rushes over, he grabs the wallet, he picks it up, and he's like, hey, you dropped your wallet. And the guy's like, oh my gosh, thanks so much. And I overheard him saying, I was just about to go to the airport, and if I didn't have my wallet, I wouldn't have my ID, I wouldn't have been able to fly. I was just about to fly down to Houston and meet my son, who has been deployed overseas for the past year, and that would have been really bad. Yeah. He said, thank you so much. Like, you made my entire year. And of course, that was awesome. But the thing is in that process, there were 3 different people or groups that were impacted. First, the person that lost his wallet, when he got the wallet back, he's like, the world is good. Yeah. The person that picked up the wallet and gave it to him said, I did a good thing. And he felt good. Yeah. Anybody who witnessed that says, wow, the world is an amazing place. What I just witnessed is you always hear that, restored my faith in humanity, right? Really, like, is the world that bad that your faith doesn't exist? But when you see someone do a kind gesture like that, it's like, it's restored. But again, we need those little reminders. So we live more fulfilled by helping others. And whether it's doing the dishes at somebody's house after a party, holding the door for someone, carrying something for somebody, or doing something big where you're able to facilitate something that impacts multiple lives or groups or organizations, it's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that knock-on effect. I mean, like that movie, what was it, Pay It Forward, where just the little things that we do may not be significant for us, but they have huge knock-on effects for the people around us. I want to go back to what you said about restoring your faith in humanity. There would be a lot of people that look at the world today and perhaps some of the events and experiences that are going on and say, the world's gone to pot. It's, people are so evil. People are so fractured. We've got a broken community. I have a tendency to say that I think we've always had these kinds of problems, but there is still a lot of good all around us. It's just whether you're looking for it and whether you're participating in it. What's your take on the natural propensity at the moment for people to look at the negative experience of life versus what's good in their life?
Well, living more fulfilled by helping others is about community. So create more experiences about self, share more stories is about friends and family. And living more fulfilled is about community. It's that world impact. It's that ripple effect where you do one thing and then it can ripple all the way around the world. My personal take is that when you're doing those three things, yeah, it's going to help you, but ultimately you're going to have a ripple effect and it's going to help others and it could impact the entire world. Now, here's the thing of my belief of taking a look, is the glass half full? Is it half empty? Whatever it is. I believe that what happens as humans is it's kind of like a pendulum. Yeah. And sometimes it's swinging all the way over and you're like, man, can't get any better than this. Life is amazing. Whether it's you personally, your community, your state, your country, or the global cause as a whole. The pendulum could be over here on one side. You're like, everything seems to be amazing. The pendulum can swing and be kind of in the middle there and just hanging, or it can swing all the way to the other side where you look at it and you're like, man, this is the worst I've ever seen it. I don't know how it's going to get better. Well, first, it's a pendulum. And the reason it's a pendulum is because I believe as humans and as a world and global society, we don't like when things are too far one way or the other. Yeah. If they're too great, we're going to self-sabotage and try to bring it back the other way. If they're too horrible, we're going to be like, we need to fix this, and we're going to come up with solutions to do that. Yeah. And so it's this constant swinging act that's happening back and forth, and it goes to good, and then something bad happens, whether it's out of our hands or whether it's part of something that we can control, but we just see it getting out of hand. And we always try and solve. And that's what we've done as a race. We've always tried to solve. Yeah. And so that's part of being human. Yeah. Stuff happens. Yeah. Let's fix it. Let's make it better. Let's try and not have it happen again. It's a new variation. Okay.
So what do you say? I'm totally agree with what you're saying is that, it's all about problem solving and seeing that things aren't going the way that they should go. We can do better. Let's figure out how to make it better. What would you say to the voices that there is a tendency at the moment to say, things are bad, let's tear down everything that we've got to this point and start from scratch? I think it's untenable. I don't know that it's a realistic way to address any kind of challenge that we have, whether personally or otherwise. What do you say to people that are just saying, let's just scrap everything that's come before, let's tear it all down and start from scratch?
This is the type of subject that, for me, I will say, whatever it takes to right wrongs. Yeah. Yeah. And if that's the scenario where we need to clean slate and say, and apologize. Yeah. Yeah. And say, we're doing our very best to recognize, show empathy, and right past wrongs. I'm all about the present and where we can go as the future. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not attached to the past where it hurt other people and other races and countries and ethnicities, like anything along the lines. And especially when it comes to everything that's happening around the world with the protests and the Black Lives Matter, we need to listen. Yeah, sure. I absolutely believe 100% we need to listen and learn and do our very best to understand and right the wrong of the past.
This is really where you talk about sharing more stories. I think one of the ways that we can do that better is just listen to people's stories. When we hear people's stories, we personalize the experience of what they've been through rather than just collectively judging or collectively labeling people based on a perception in society.
Well, I think that's absolutely applicable here, especially in a scenario where you see, let's just take statues as an example.
Yeah, sure.
Everybody has a story in and around them. Here's the story of the statue. Here's the story of the person. Here's the story of the time. And here's the story of why this exists today.
Yeah. Yeah.
But refusing to look and understand and have empathy or sympathy and understand and then go, that absolutely makes sense to me. And then being able to correct. If you're not willing to do that and you're stuck only in your story, then the only thing you're doing is telling and you're never listening. And if you don't listen to another human being, you will never understand them. And if you don't understand them, you don't know them, and you don't get the right to say that they're wrong.
Okay, so how do you do that well? I just interviewed Dr. Lou Augusta, who's an expert in empathy, and he talks about the ability to be able to hear somebody and to understand where they are at. How do you tell stories and listen to other stories, even when people are coming from different perspectives? Because it seems like now that a lot of people are trying to tell their story, but nobody's really listening to each other. There's a lot of shouting. There's a lot of listen to my story, but nobody's really stopping and saying, hey, I want to hear you, even if I disagree with you or don't see the world that you see. How do you do that?
I think what I teach is this. Ask a question. Someone sits down next to you in the middle seat of an airplane.
Yeah.
You can either choose to ignore them the entire flight, or you can start talking to them. And if they want to be talked to, if they're curious about engaging and having, the best thing you can do is ask a question.
Yeah.
Listen, and then don't respond. Don't listen to respond. You're listening to ask another question.
Great.
You could spend the entire flight saying about 6 things, and this person will tell you 1, 2, 3 hours of amazing storyline information that you would probably never know because you asked, then listened, then asked, then listened. And I promise that if you listen to somebody without trying to respond, but just listen, you will walk away a different person.
Yeah, absolutely. Such good wisdom there. Tell us more about, I've really enjoyed just hearing you unpack your bucket list life and how we can start applying it. But you're actually helping speakers and how they can improve their speaking profession or their career, become professional speakers. What's that look like for you? What are you doing right now to help speakers in that regard?
So for me, I really believe that everybody has a message. I believe everybody is inspirational, and inspiration flows in both directions. So just because I'm on stage and I have a message doesn't mean that my message is the only message. Yep. And yes, I'm impacting lives, but I realize that other people have phenomenal messages that they need to impact lives. But here's the challenge for a lot of people. They have this great message, but they maybe don't know how to put it together in a coherent way for delivery. So they're like, okay, I have a little bit here, a little bit there, but I don't know how to do it. So it's really about refining the message. If they could refine the message, they're already a step ahead to impacting lives.
Yeah.
Then if I can help them with the stage delivery, with the stage craft itself, that true brilliance of being able to engage people for 30, 45, an hour or longer. If you can engage people for a long period of time, your message will become more powerful and impact more lives.
Great.
And then ultimately, the third part, which is the most challenging for a lot of people, is the business side of speaking. They don't realize that, yes, it's a business. You know, just because someone's a great chef doesn't mean they can run a restaurant successfully. But if I can teach people messaging, stagecraft, and the business of speaking, and I put those 3 things together, then they go out and they get on stages. And the more people that they can get in front of and they can impact, then I am indirectly impacting more lives because I'm helping speakers get their message out. So that's really where that next step, which is I continue to speak from the stage internationally, but I have such a passion for helping others be able to get there. So we started, and I say we because it's me and my team.
Yeah.
And we created Kenyon Salo speaker training, and now we're training speakers and we're helping them be able to navigate this industry, be super impactful from the stage and deliver the brilliant message that they were put on this planet to deliver.
That's so good. Kenyon, how do we get a hold of this training? Is it something that can be accessed online, or are they live workshops? What's the process of getting involved in that?
Well, the brilliance with this is that it's not just a course which is only online. You actually have access to me, access to the team. We do group coaching calls every single week. Right. We're adding value every single week, week in and week out. And as I continue to learn stuff in the industry, because I have my pulse on it, I'm able to immediately turn that around and help speakers. It's super simple. It's just kenyonsalo.com. Right. There's a training button on the site. Just click that. It'll give you the information. And I'm Kenyon Salo across the board on all social media sites. I want to connect with people, reach out. And I tell people, if anybody's thinking about speaking, or whether they're speaking and they're having a more difficult time navigating the industry, let's jump on a call. I'm giving away 30-minute speaker strategy sessions. So you can go online, you can book a free 30-minute speaker strategy session with me. And I get to learn about you, and let's chat, and I want to help people.
Yeah, it's so good. And the Bucket Life list, can we access that online as well, or is that only a keynote that you do?
It's just a keynote that I do at this time, and really, ultimately, people just need to think about their own version of the bucket list life, which is, are they going to say yes and let the how figure itself out later to create experiences? Remember, connect with people as much as possible and share your story, but remember, listen and learn if you can about their story, and ultimately live more fulfilled by helping others.
I love it. It's such a simple philosophy, but so powerful. If people want to connect with you, Kenyon, you've said social media. Do you have a podcast as well?
I do not have a podcast. No. Long ago, I did the Bucket List Life podcast and did about 60 episodes. But now I'm in the area of just reaching out and delivering my message through other people's podcasts.
Great. That's awesome. So we're going to put the links in the description for how you can access Kenyon's material. But Kenyon, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
It's been a true pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you got a ton of value out of that episode. Don't forget to let us know what you thought in the comments. And if you have a topic you'd like us to cover next time, we'd love to hear from you. If you know anyone that would benefit from the content that we produce, please like and share this channel. And we look forward to having you next time on the Tarun Stevenson Leadership Channel.